The first proof of my death was taped to the glass door of a bakery. It was a cream-colored memorial flyer with a black border, the kind people print when they want grief to look tasteful. At the top was a photograph of me. Not an old photograph. Not one taken from social media 10 years earlier. It was the picture from my employee badge, the one kept inside a locked personnel file at the Ashford Community Trust. Underneath my face were the words, "In loving memory of Mara Ellison. 1967 to 2026. A life of service, kindness, and quiet courage." For several seconds, I stood on the sidewalk with my suitcase beside me and read the dates again. The bakery window reflected a woman who was sunburned, exhausted, and very much alive. A bus sighed at the curb behind me. Someone pushed past my shoulder. A paper cup rolled along the gutter in the wind. The whole city kept moving. Only I had stopped. 6 months earlier, I had left for a volunteer project in an isolated mountain community where there was no reliable cell service and electricity came from a generator that failed whenever it rained. I had sent letters whenever supply trucks went down the mountain. I had expected unanswered emails. A crowded refrigerator. Maybe a dead houseplant or two. I had not expected my own memorial. And I certainly had not expected to walk 3 blocks to my house and see my best friend through the living room window. Wearing my clothes. Pouring wine for my colleagues. And twisting my grandmother's engagement ring around her finger as though it had always belonged to her. Claire Donovan had not simply taken advantage of my absence. She had erased me. She had moved into my house, stepped into my position at work, and convinced everyone I loved that I had died overseas. What she did not know was that I had arrived home 2 days earlier than anyone expected. She had planned a celebration for that evening. A private gathering to announce the launch of a charitable fund created in my memory. There were flowers in my hallway. Champagne cooling in my kitchen. And a framed photograph of me resting beside the fireplace like a warning. Claire believed she had inherited my life. But before the night was over, I would discover something far worse than theft. My death had not been reported by a distant official. It had been personally confirmed. By her. The driver left me at the corner because a delivery truck was blocking the street. I remember being irritated by that. It seems absurd now, but after 30 hours of travel, irritation was easier to carry than exhaustion. My shoulders ached beneath my coat. Dust from the mountain road still clung to the seams of my suitcase. My hair smelled faintly of airport soap and wood smoke. All I wanted was a hot shower, clean sheets, and the familiar hum of my refrigerator. Instead, I found myself staring at a photograph of my own face in the bakery window. I pulled the flyer down. The tape made a sharp ripping sound. A woman arranging pastries inside looked up and hurried toward the door. "We're closed for another 10 minutes, she said through the glass. I held up the flyer. "Where did you get this?" Her expression changed before she opened the door. She looked at the photograph. Then at me. Then back at the photograph. The color slowly left her face. "Oh," she whispered. The lock clicked. She opened the door only a few inches. "I'm sorry. You look like someone." "I am someone." My voice sounded calmer than I felt. I turned the flyer toward her. "Where did this come from?" The woman's fingers tightened around the edge of the door. "They were handed out after the service." "What service?" She swallowed. "The memorial." A delivery man wheeled a metal cart behind her. Trays rattled. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer began to beep. The ordinary sounds felt insulting. "When?" "About 3 months ago." I stared at her. 3 months. For half my trip, the people at home had believed I was dead. Who organized it? I don't know. She hesitated. Your family, I suppose. I don't have any living family. Her eyes lowered to the flyer. There was a woman. Blonde. Very elegant. She spoke. Claire. I did not need to hear the name. I had known Claire Donovan for 32 years. We had met during our first week of graduate school, when she spilled coffee across my notes and cried harder than the accident deserved. We had survived bad apartments, disappointing men, job losses, my mother's illness, and the sudden death of Claire's younger brother. She was the person listed under emergency contact in every file that mattered. She had a key to my house. She knew the alarm code. She knew where I kept my passport, my will, and the small cedar box containing my grandmother's ring. The bakery owner was still watching me. Was there a body? I asked. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. At the memorial, I said. Was there a coffin? No. Just a photograph. They said your remains couldn't be returned. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I placed one hand against the doorframe. The woman reached toward me, then stopped. Should I call someone? No. An ambulance? No. The police? That question settled between us. My first instinct was to say yes. To call the police. To call my office. To call Claire and demand an explanation so loudly that every lie she had told would collapse under the sound of my voice. But instinct is not always intelligence. And something about the photograph bothered me. It was not the picture itself. It was the source. My employee badge photograph had never been posted online. Claire had no reason to possess it unless she had access to my personnel records. That meant this was not a misunderstanding created by bad communication. Someone had gone through locked files. Someone had selected a photograph. Someone had printed dates beneath it. Someone had made my death official enough for a memorial to feel believable. I folded the flyer and placed it inside my coat. Please don't call anyone yet, I said. The bakery owner looked frightened by that request. I'm not trying to cause trouble, I told her. I need to understand what happened before people know I'm back. Are you in danger? I considered the question. I don't know. That was the first honest thing I had said since stepping off the plane. My house was 3 blocks away. I walked slowly, pulling my suitcase over uneven pavement while the wheels struck every crack. Nothing looked different. The sycamore trees still leaned over the street. Mr. Alvarez's blue pickup was parked in its usual place. The little girl from number 16 had drawn stars in chalk across the sidewalk. The world had preserved everything except me. When I reached my gate, I noticed fresh white flowers planted along the path. Claire hated gardening. She once told me soil under her fingernails made her feel aggressively mortal. The curtains in the front room had been replaced with pale linen panels. Through them, I could see movement. For one foolish second, relief rose inside me. Claire was there. Whatever had happened, she would explain it. Perhaps there had been a mistaken report from the aid organization. Perhaps she had believed it. Perhaps grief had made her stay at the house because she could not bear to leave it empty. People behave strangely when they lose someone. I knew that. I had defended Claire in my mind before I even reached the front door. That is the humiliating thing about loving someone. Your loyalty starts building their defense before the evidence has finished speaking. My key entered the lock but would not turn. I tried again. Then a third time. The deadbolt had been changed. I stepped back and looked at the brass number above the door. 38. My house. The home my grandparents had purchased in 1954. The home where my mother had taken her last breath in the upstairs bedroom because she refused to die beneath hospital lights. I pressed the bell. No answer. I pressed it again. Music was playing inside, soft piano mixed with the murmur of several voices. I moved toward the side window. Claire stood in my living room with a glass of wine in her hand. Her hair was shorter than when I had left, cut neatly at her jaw. She wore a dark green silk blouse I had bought in Boston and never worn because I decided the color made me look tired. On Claire, it looked expensive. She was laughing with Daniel Price, the chairman of the board at the Ashford Community Trust. My employer. Or what I had assumed was still my employer. Daniel touched Claire's arm and said something I could not hear. She lowered her eyes modestly, performing the expression she used whenever someone praised her in public. There were at least 8 people in the room. All of them knew me. None of them knew I was standing 10 feet away. Then Claire raised her left hand to brush a strand of hair from her face. The ring caught the afternoon light. A narrow platinum band. A small oval diamond surrounded by tiny emeralds. My grandmother's engagement ring. The ring my grandfather had saved for nearly 4 years to buy. The ring I had worn only once, at my mother's funeral, before returning it to the cedar box in my bedroom closet. Claire rotated it gently around her finger. A private, familiar gesture. As if she had been wearing it for months. The grief came before the anger. It surprised me. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I was no longer standing beside the house. I was 12 years old, sitting at my grandmother's dressing table while she held the ring beneath the yellow glow of a bedside lamp. Jewelry remembers, she had told me. I had laughed. She tapped my hand. Not magic, Mara. People. People look at a thing and remember who touched it before them. From inside the house, someone opened the French doors leading to the garden. I stepped behind the hedge before they could see me. 2 servers carried empty boxes toward a van in the alley. One complained about the weight of the champagne. The other laughed and said, "It's a memorial fund, not a wedding." A memorial fund. I waited until they had gone, then moved along the side of the house. Through the kitchen window, I saw silver serving trays arranged on my marble counter. A printed sign stood beside the champagne bottles. The Mara Ellison Legacy Initiative. A new beginning inspired by a life cut short. Below the title was Claire's name. Founder and Executive Director. I read it twice. The Ashford Community Trust had been my life for 17 years. I had started as a grant coordinator and worked my way into the executive director's office by learning every unglamorous part of the job. Budgets. Community hearings. Donor politics. Leaking roofs in historic buildings. Claire had joined the trust 6 years earlier after her consulting business failed. I had recommended her. I had convinced the board to overlook the gap in her resume. I had given her an office 2 doors from mine. Now she was standing in my home beside my board chairman, using my death to launch something with my name attached to it. A car door slammed near the gate. I lowered my head and moved quickly toward the alley, dragging my suitcase behind me. My hands had begun to shake. Not violently. Just enough to make the zipper pull tap against the metal frame. I walked until the house was out of sight. Then I stopped beside a row of trash bins and pressed both palms against the brick wall. There are moments when your mind refuses to accept what your eyes have already understood. It searches for softer explanations. Perhaps Claire had been given the ring in a will. Perhaps the board had appointed her temporarily. Perhaps the gathering was not a celebration but a fundraiser organized by people who genuinely believed I was gone. But the changed locks did not feel temporary. The new curtains did not feel temporary. My blouse on Claire's body did not feel temporary. And grief did not explain the way she had laughed. It was not the laughter of a woman struggling to live in the ruins of her best friend's life. It was relaxed. Practiced. At home. I checked into a motel near the train station under the name Mara Lane. Lane had been my grandmother's maiden name. The clerk barely looked at my passport. He slid a key card across the counter and told me breakfast ended at 9. The room smelled of bleach and old heating vents. A faded painting of a lighthouse hung above the bed. I placed my suitcase beside the desk and sat without removing my coat. For 10 minutes, I did nothing. Then I opened my laptop. The battery was nearly dead. The motel Wi-Fi dropped twice before connecting. My inbox contained more than 4,000 unread messages. Most were automated. Several were marked with subjects such as regarding Mara. Our deepest condolences. Ashford Trust leadership transition. Estate documentation required. I clicked the leadership announcement first. The Trust's website opened slowly. A banner filled the screen. Remembering Mara Ellison, a legacy of compassion. Below it was a statement from Claire. She wrote that I had died during a flash flood while traveling between rural villages. She described me as her sister in every way that mattered. She wrote that my final wish had been for her to continue my work. I had made no such wish. I had not been in a flash flood. The worst weather during my trip had been a 3-day rainstorm that washed out a footbridge and delayed a supply truck. No one had died. No one had even been seriously injured. I searched my name. Obituaries appeared immediately. Local newspapers. Professional associations. A statement from the mayor's office. There were photographs from the memorial Claire had organized inside the Trust's main hall. My photograph on an easel. White lilies. Candles. Claire at the podium, one hand pressed against her chest. In one image, Daniel Price stood beside her with his arm around her shoulders. The caption identified Claire as the Trust's newly appointed executive director. She had not only taken my job. She had allowed the board to believe I had personally prepared her to replace me. I called the number of the volunteer organization that had arranged my travel. A recording said the office was closed. I tried an emergency contact. After 4 rings, a young man answered. Regional Aid Coordination. My name is Mara Ellison. I've just returned from the Darren Valley project. There was a pause. I'm sorry. Who did you say? Mara Ellison. Another pause. Longer this time. That isn't possible. I looked at the lighthouse painting above the bed. I'm beginning to hear that often. The man asked me to confirm my date of birth and volunteer number. I gave him both. I heard typing. Then silence. Our records show you left the project early, he said carefully. I did not. It says you departed with a private transport team on February 17th. I was in Kestrel Village on February 17th. We were repairing the school roof. Do you have documentation? Photographs. Journal entries. 38 people who saw me. I'm not accusing you of anything, Ms. Ellison. You just told me I left a place where I remained for another 4 months. He exhaled into the receiver. There's an incident report attached to your file. What incident? I can't release that over the phone. Why? Because you're listed as deceased. The word sounded colder when spoken by a stranger. What does the report say? I'm sorry. Who submitted it? I really can't. Was it Claire Donovan? The silence answered before he did. I'm going to transfer you to our legal department. The call disconnected during the transfer. When I tried again, no one answered. My bank account was next. The password had been changed. The recovery email was no longer mine. I called the fraud line and waited 27 minutes while recorded music played through the speaker. When an agent finally answered, she asked for my name, account number, and security code. Then her tone shifted. Ms. Ellison, this account is part of a deceased customer estate process. I'm not deceased. I understand what you're saying. No, you understand the words. I need you to understand the fact. She asked me to remain calm. People often say that when your calmness makes them uncomfortable. I told her I was sitting quietly in a motel room. I told her my passport was open in front of me. I told her I could walk into a branch. She placed me on hold. When she returned, her voice was lower. The accounts were closed following receipt of a certified death record and letters of administration. Who was appointed administrator? I'm unable to disclose estate details until your identity has been formally reviewed. It's my estate. I understand. Stop saying that. She went silent. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, I said. You're doing your job. But someone has emptied my accounts, and I need to know where the money went. I can place an immediate restriction on any remaining estate-linked funds. Any remaining funds? Another pause. How much is left? I'm not authorized to provide a balance. That meant very little. Or nothing. Before ending the call, she gave me an appointment at a downtown branch for the following morning. I wrote the confirmation number on the back of my memorial flyer. My handwriting looked unfamiliar. Night had settled over the city by the time I left the motel. I bought a prepaid phone, a plain wool hat, and a coat large enough to hide the clothes I had worn home. I told myself I was being cautious. The truth was less flattering. I was afraid Claire would see me. Not because I believed she would hurt me. At least, not yet. I was afraid she would cry. I was afraid she would run toward me, wrap her arms around me, and invent an explanation I desperately wanted to believe. 32 years of friendship had trained me to trust the tremble in her voice. I needed facts before she had the chance to turn emotion into fog. So I returned to my street after dark. The gathering was still going. Luxury cars lined both sides of the road. Warm light spilled from my windows. Through the open curtains, people moved around the rooms holding champagne. Someone had placed candles along the garden wall. My home looked beautiful. That hurt more than I expected. I walked behind the neighboring houses and entered the narrow service lane. The rear gate had an old mechanical lock that Claire did not know could be opened by lifting the latch with a thin piece of metal. My grandfather had installed it decades earlier. I used the clip from my luggage tag. The gate opened with a quiet scrape. Music drifted from the house. I stayed in the shadows beneath the magnolia tree. From there, I could see through the dining room windows. Claire stood near the fireplace, speaking to Daniel and a man I recognized as Leonard Voss, a property developer who had spent years trying to purchase our block. My house sat at the center of a row of historically protected properties. Leonard wanted to turn them into private offices and luxury residences. I had rejected 3 of his offers. Claire was holding a folder with his company's logo on the front. She passed it to Daniel. Leonard said something that made both of them smile. Then Claire glanced toward the hallway. Her expression changed. Just for a moment. The smile disappeared. She was looking at the small table beside the stairs. On it sat the framed photograph from my memorial. Beside the frame, someone had placed a silver music box shaped like a swan. My music box. Claire had given it to me on my 25th birthday. We used to joke that its song was so mournful it could make wallpaper feel abandoned. Claire approached the table and touched the lid. The gesture was gentle. Almost guilty. Then she looked over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching. She opened the music box. The melody floated faintly through the room. For 1 second, I saw the woman I thought I knew. Her eyes filled. Her shoulders lowered. Then Daniel called her name. Claire snapped the lid shut, wiped beneath one eye, and returned to the party. That brief sadness disturbed me more than her laughter had. A stranger could have stolen my life without hesitation. But Claire was not a stranger. She remembered exactly whose life it was. And she had taken it anyway. The next morning, I arrived at the bank before it opened. The branch manager met me in a glass-walled office. Her name was Priya Shah. She wore a navy suit and kept her expression professionally neutral while examining my passport. She asked me to remove my glasses. Then she compared my face with the photograph. "I believe you are Mara Ellison," she said. Relief loosened something in my chest. But belief is not enough to reverse a legal death record. Then what is? A formal correction from the Vital Records Office, supported by law enforcement and identity verification. How long? I can't estimate. What happened to my money? Priya folded her hands. Your personal accounts were transferred into an estate account. Several disbursements were then made under court-authorized administration. To Claire Donovan? Some were issued to an entity she controls. How much? Priya looked down at the file. Approximately $480,000. The air left my lungs slowly. That amount included my savings, my mother's remaining inheritance, and the money I had planned to use for retirement. There was also an insurance payment, Priya added. I looked up. What insurance payment? A life insurance policy held through your employer. I didn't name Claire as the beneficiary. The beneficiary was listed as the Mara Ellison Legacy Initiative. That organization did not exist when I left. Priya's expression tightened. The designation change was submitted electronically 5 weeks before your reported death. I was already overseas. Did anyone have access to your personal files or authentication information? I thought of Claire sitting at my kitchen table before my trip. She had helped me sort documents because I was worried I might forget something important. At one point, she had held my phone while I climbed into the attic to find an insurance folder. She knew the answers to questions no criminal should have known. My first pet. My mother's middle name. The street where I grew up. The name of the hospital where I was born. They were not security questions to her. They were memories. Priya turned her monitor slightly away from the glass wall. I'm not supposed to provide copies until the investigation is opened, she said. But you should see this. She placed a document on the desk. It was a scanned death certificate bearing the seal of a foreign regional authority. My full name was typed across the top. My birth date was correct. My passport number was correct. The cause of death was listed as accidental drowning during a flash flood. No remains recovered. Identification established through personal belongings, travel records, and sworn witness testimony. At the bottom was a signature. Claire Donovan. Her relationship to the deceased was recorded as sister. I stared at the word. Priya remained silent. Claire doesn't have a sister, I said. My voice sounded far away. she never did. I kept reading. Attached to the certificate was a witness declaration. Claire claimed she had received my damaged travel bag, identification papers, and handwritten final letter from a regional official. A final letter. I had written no final letter. "Can you open the attachment?" I asked. Priya hesitated. Then clicked. A scanned page appeared on the screen. The handwriting looked like mine. Not perfectly, but close enough to fool anyone who had only seen my signature on holiday cards. The letter said I had always considered Claire my family. It said that if anything happened to me, I wanted her to protect my home, continue my work, and use my estate to create something meaningful. At the bottom were 8 words that made my skin go cold. "Give grandmother's ring the life I never did." Priya looked at me. "Does that phrase mean something?" I could barely answer. Only 3 people had ever heard me say anything like it. My mother, my grandmother, and Claire. My mother and grandmother were dead. I left the bank carrying a sealed folder and the first certified proof that my best friend had manufactured my death. Outside, the morning traffic moved through wet streets. Delivery bicycles cut between cars. A church bell rang somewhere beyond the office buildings. I stood beneath the bank awning and watched rain gather along the curb. Until that moment, part of me had still been waiting for an explanation. A terrible mistake. A confused report. A chain of panicked decisions that had grown beyond Claire's control. But mistakes do not forge handwriting. Grief does not change beneficiaries. Loneliness does not invent final wishes. Claire had not believed I was dead. She had needed everyone else to believe it. And somewhere inside my house, surrounded by flowers purchased with my money, she was preparing to sell the last place on earth that still carried my family's name. I could have gone directly to the police. I nearly did. Instead, I opened the folder again and studied Claire's signature beneath the word sworn witness. She had spent months preparing her story. I had been alive for less than 24 hours in the eyes of anyone who mattered. At that moment, Claire possessed the house, the money, the documents, the sympathy of the board, and the confidence of every mutual friend we had. I possessed a passport, a motel key, and the truth. The truth should have been enough. But the truth, I was beginning to understand, is only powerful when people are ready to believe the person carrying it. Claire had already taught them to mourn me. Now I had to find out what else she had taught them. Before I tell you what I did next, tell me this. If you returned home and discovered someone you trusted had taken your name, your home, and your entire life, would you confront them immediately? Or would you stay silent long enough to learn how deep the betrayal really went? Because I chose silence. And that was when Claire began to feel the first signs that the woman she had buried might not be gone after all. Silence is often mistaken for weakness. Claire had always made that mistake. Whenever we argued, she spoke first, spoke longest, and usually spoke last. She treated hesitation as surrender and restraint as proof that the other person had nothing worth saying. For 32 years, I had allowed her to believe that. Now, for the first time, it became useful. I returned to the motel before noon and spread everything I owned across the narrow bed. Passport. Bank documents. The folded memorial flyer. My old volunteer identification. 3 handwritten journals from the village. A small digital camera. Receipts from supply stations. Photographs showing me alive weeks after my supposed death. My evidence filled less than half the mattress. Claire's evidence occupied court records, bank systems, insurance files, personnel databases, and the memories of hundreds of people. She had built a version of reality. I had returned carrying luggage. The difference frightened me. I sat at the desk and wrote down every question I could not answer. How had Claire reported my death? Who had helped her? How had she obtained a foreign death certificate? Why had the volunteer organization recorded that I left early? How much money remained? Why was Leonard Voss inside my house? What exactly was Claire planning to sell? And why had Daniel Price accepted her story without demanding independent confirmation? The final question hurt more than I expected. Daniel had known me for 15 years. We had disagreed often, sometimes loudly, but I believed he respected me. He had sat beside my mother's hospital bed. He had delivered groceries when I was too exhausted to leave the house. Yet 3 months after my supposed death, he was drinking champagne with the woman who had taken my office. Trust does not usually vanish all at once. It is removed in pieces while you are still calling it whole. I needed help. Not emotional support. Not yet. I needed someone who would examine facts before reacting to the impossibility of my presence. There was only one person I could think of. Evelyn Hart. Evelyn had worked as the trust's legal counsel for nearly 12 years before retiring. She was 71, sharp-eyed, unsentimental, and famously difficult to charm. Claire disliked her. That made Evelyn immediately valuable. I bought a cheap umbrella from the motel lobby and walked 6 blocks to a public telephone outside the train station. Evelyn answered on the 5th ring. Hart residence. It's Mara. The line went silent. Rain struck the metal roof above the telephone booth. Who is this? She asked. Mara Ellison. That isn't amusing. I agree. Another silence. Then I heard the faint sound of a chair moving. Where are you? I need you to answer a question first. Mara. At my mother's funeral, what did you hide in the library? Evelyn inhaled sharply. No one else knew the answer. During the funeral reception, Evelyn had spilled red wine across her blouse. Too proud to ask for help, she removed it in the library, rinsed it in the downstairs sink, and spent 20 minutes wearing my grandfather's formal jacket while the blouse dried over a heating vent. I had found her standing between shelves, sleeves hanging past her hands, furious with the universe. You promised never to mention that, she said. I kept the promise for 11 years. Her voice changed. Not softer. More careful. Where are you? Near Central Station. Are you alone? Yes. Stay there. No. Not the station. Too many cameras. The words came out before I had fully considered them. Evelyn noticed. What happened to you? I came home yesterday. She exhaled slowly. I attended your memorial. I saw the photographs. I watched Claire identify your belongings. What belongings? Your travel bag. Passport copies. Your mother's locket. My hand moved instinctively to my throat. The locket had been inside my bedroom safe. What else? A blood-stained jacket. I looked down at the coat I was wearing. What kind? Brown field jacket. Heavy canvas. I had owned one like that. Claire had borrowed it the previous winter. Evelyn, I need you to meet me somewhere private. There's a conservatory in West Bridge Park. The side entrance is rarely used in the rain. When? 40 minutes. She ended the call. No tears. No disbelief. No questions she could not afford to ask over the phone. That was why I had chosen her. The conservatory smelled of wet stone and warm earth. Water crawled down the glass ceiling while tropical plants filled the air with a heavy green sweetness. Evelyn waited beside an artificial pond, wearing a beige raincoat and holding her umbrella like a walking stick. When she saw me, she did not move. For several seconds, she simply studied my face. Then she walked forward and touched my cheek. Her fingers were cold. "You're thinner," she said. It was such an ordinary observation that I nearly cried. "I'm alive. I can see that." She removed her hand. Then she slapped me. Not hard enough to injure me. Hard enough to make the sound echo against the glass. What was that for? 6 months without one direct message. There was no service. There were supply trucks. I sent letters. None arrived. I stared at her. I sent 7. Evelyn's anger disappeared. Then someone intercepted them. We stood between enormous fern leaves while the rain intensified above us. A family passed at the other end of the path, a little boy pressing both palms against the glass of a butterfly enclosure. Evelyn lowered her voice. "Start at the beginning." I told her everything. The bakery. The locked door. Claire in my house. The ring. The trust announcement. The bank records. The forged final letter. Evelyn listened without interrupting until I mentioned Leonard Voss. Then her mouth tightened. "Claire is selling the house." I suspected that. Not just the house. She looked around before continuing. "She's assembling parcels across the entire block." My stomach tightened. "How?" "Your property controls access to a service road behind the neighboring buildings. Without it, Leonard's redevelopment project cannot meet planning requirements. That's why he kept increasing his offers. And why you kept refusing them. My grandparents' home is protected. Individually, yes. But Claire has filed a structural hardship petition." "A what?" "She claims the building requires repairs beyond the estate's ability to fund. The house was inspected last year." "I know. I reviewed the report." "Then the petition is false." "Probably." "Probably?" Evelyn's expression remained flat. "We need documents, Mara. Outrage is not evidence." It sounded cruel. It was also true. Evelyn led me to a bench behind a wall of broad-leafed plants. "The board received confirmation of your death through 3 separate channels," she said. "The Foreign Civil Authority, the aid organization, and Claire. All 3 could trace back to the same false report." "Yes." "Did Daniel question it?" "At first." "What changed?" Claire produced a letter. "My forged final letter?" "Not that one. A second letter, addressed to Daniel." I stared at her. "What did it say?" "That you had discovered financial irregularities inside the trust. That the stress had affected your judgment. That you planned to take an extended leave and wanted Claire to manage operations." "I never wrote that." "I know." "How?" "Because it described Daniel as a steady moral compass." Despite everything, I almost laughed. Evelyn did not. "You once called him an expensive weather vane with cuff links." "He remembers that?" "He does now." "Why would Claire want people to believe I was unstable before I died?" "To explain any inconsistencies in your behavior." Missed calls. Unanswered messages. Changes to accounts. Maybe even documents you supposedly signed. She prepared the ground before reporting the death. Yes. The realization settled slowly. Claire had not improvised after losing contact with me. She had used my disappearance as cover. While I was repairing roofs and carrying medicine between villages, she had been rewriting the final months of my life. She made my silence appear deliberate. Then unstable. Then permanent. Why did you leave the trust? I asked. Evelyn looked toward the pond. I didn't retire when I said I did. What happened? Claire accused me of mishandling privileged documents. That's absurd. It was also convenient. The board offered me a quiet separation rather than a public inquiry. Daniel allowed it? Daniel believed he was protecting the trust. He always believes that. Claire had copies of emails that appeared to show I forwarded donor records to a private account. Did you? No. Forged? Altered. Convincingly. I looked at her. You already suspected her. I suspected someone. Then you died, and Claire became untouchable. A gardener pushed a cart along the path behind us. Metal tools clinked softly beneath a canvas cover. Evelyn leaned closer. Your death did not begin with the death certificate. It began when she removed anyone likely to challenge her. The word stayed with me. Claire had isolated my life before taking it. First the lawyer. Then perhaps the board. Then the aid organization. Then me. Go to the police with me, Evelyn said. Not yet. Her eyes narrowed. You have enough to open an investigation. An investigation that will alert Claire. That is generally how investigations work. She'll destroy anything left inside the house. Then let the police secure it. What if they treat me as an identity claimant instead of a victim? They might. What if Claire says I'm an imposter? She will. What if she has already prepared for that? Evelyn did not answer. I continued. My face is known. My fingerprints exist. Eventually I can prove who I am. But proving I'm alive is not the same as proving Claire created the fraud. You want her to lead you to the evidence. I want to know who helped her. This is not a detective novel. I know. Then stop thinking like a woman with unlimited time and protection. Her voice sharpened. You are legally dead. You have almost no access to money. Your home is occupied. Your identity has been compromised. And the person responsible knows every detail of your habits. I understand. No, you are controlling your voice. That is not the same thing. I looked away. A bright blue butterfly landed on the glass beside us, opening and closing its wings against the rain-dark afternoon. I need 48 hours, I said. For what? To find something the police can act on immediately. And if Claire discovers you? Then I go to them with what I have. Evelyn shook her head. You've always confused patience with safety. And Claire has always confused confidence with control. We looked at each other. Finally, Evelyn reached into her bag and removed a small notebook. 48 hours, she said. After that, I contact a detective I trust whether you agree or not. I nodded. Also, you do nothing illegal. I entered my own garden last night. Legally, it currently belongs to your estate. Which belongs to me. Legally, you are dead. I'm beginning to dislike that sentence. You should. It is going to become expensive. We spent the next 3 hours building a list of what could be verified without alerting Claire. Property filings. Corporate registrations. Insurance documents. Board minutes. Planning applications. Public donor announcements. Evelyn had contacts who still trusted her, though most believed she had retired bitterly after a professional mistake. She would make quiet inquiries. I would stay invisible. Before we separated, she gave me an old phone and a small envelope of cash. I don't need charity, I said. This is not charity. It is litigation funding. You think I'm paying you back? With interest. That sounds more like you. For the first time since my return, Evelyn smiled. It lasted less than a second. Then she caught my wrist. Do not underestimate Claire because you loved her. I'm not. You are. Love creates outdated information. You remember who she was before she needed you gone. That evening, I sat in the motel room and opened one of my travel journals. Most pages contained practical notes. Medication deliveries. Village names. Weather. Supply shortages. But between them were letters I had intended to send home. Some were addressed to Claire. I read one dated 3 weeks after my arrival. The nights here are so quiet that I can hear the generator change pitch when someone turns on a kettle. You would hate the insects, but you would love the sky. I keep thinking about that ridiculous promise we made at 23, that if neither of us married, we would become two terrifying old women living in the same house and criticizing everyone's curtains. I stopped reading. On the bed beside me lay the memorial flyer Claire had printed. She had not simply stolen from a stranger who trusted her. She had stolen from the person who had imagined growing old beside her. I closed the journal. Pain can make a person reckless. But it can also make details painfully clear. Claire knew my sentimental habits. She knew which objects mattered. She knew I saved every letter, every birthday card, every embarrassing photograph. If I wanted to frighten her, I did not need threats. I needed memory. The first object was a brass key. It did not open anything anymore. Years earlier, Claire and I had rented a dreadful apartment above a dry cleaner. The radiator clanged at night, the bathroom ceiling leaked, and the front door required a key that looked too small for the lock. When we finally moved out, Claire gave me her copy. Keep it, she said. Proof we survived. I had stored it inside a sewing tin in the attic. The house had several entrances, but the attic could be reached from an exterior maintenance hatch above the rear porch. The hatch was narrow. At 60 years old, I no longer moved through tight spaces with the confidence I had at 30. Still, just before dawn, I returned. The street was quiet. A mist hung above the gardens, turning the lamps into pale circles. I entered through the rear gate and climbed the old wooden trellis carefully, testing each rung before placing my weight on it. The attic window resisted at first. Then the swollen frame shifted. Dust filled my throat. I slid inside. The attic smelled of cedar, old paper, and insulation. Boxes had been moved. Several were open. Claire had searched through them. My mother's winter coats were gone. So were 2 antique lamps and a set of silver candlesticks. The sewing tin remained beneath a stack of school photographs. Inside was the brass key. I held it in my palm for several seconds. It was warm from the attic air. I could have taken dozens of valuable objects. Instead, I took only the key. Before leaving, I noticed a row of flattened cardboard boxes near the stairs. Printed across them was the name of an auction company. Claire was not merely living among my belongings. She was selling them. The Legacy Initiative office occupied a renovated warehouse near the river. According to its website, the organization would provide micro-investment opportunities for women rebuilding after personal loss. The language sounded compassionate. The financial structure did not. Evelyn sent me the registration documents that afternoon. Claire held 70% ownership through a private company. Leonard Voss held 20%. Daniel Price held the remaining 10% through a family trust. The so-called memorial fund was not a charity. It was an investment vehicle. My name was attracting donors. Their money would finance private property purchases. Claire was using my reputation to raise capital for Leonard's redevelopment projects. And Daniel was involved. I read the documents 3 times before accepting the truth. Daniel had not simply been deceived. He was benefiting. I called Evelyn. Daniel owns part of it. I saw. You knew? For 12 minutes. He stood beside my mother's coffin. Mara. He told me integrity was the only asset a nonprofit could not replace. Mara. I trusted him. I know. I stood near the motel window, watching a woman drag a red suitcase through the rain. What do? We prove whether he understood the fraud. He accepted equity. That proves greed. Not knowledge of a forged death. It proves enough for me. The courts will be less emotionally efficient. I closed my eyes. Claire learned this from him. No, Evelyn said. Do not make him responsible for the choices she made. The correction stung. It was easier to imagine Claire as influenced, corrupted, or pulled into something larger. Harder to accept that she had designed it. That night, I followed Claire. Not closely. She knew my walk, my posture, even the way I tilted my head when trying to hear something at a distance. I wore a dark coat and kept half a block between us. She left my house just after 9 and drove to a quiet restaurant near the river. Leonard Voss was waiting in a rear booth. Through the front window, I watched them speak. Leonard did most of the talking. Claire listened with both hands wrapped around a glass of water. At one point, he slid a document across the table. She refused to touch it. He pushed it closer. She said something sharp. Leonard leaned back and smiled. Claire looked afraid. It was the first time I had seen fear on her face. Not grief. Not guilt. Fear. 10 minutes later, she signed. When she left, she stood beneath the restaurant awning and pressed one hand against her stomach. Leonard came out behind her. He touched her shoulder. Claire pulled away. Their exchange lasted only seconds, but the tension was unmistakable. She was not fully in control. That mattered. It did not absolve her. But it changed the shape of the danger. I waited until Claire drove away, then entered the restaurant. The server was clearing their table. A torn strip of paper lay beneath the booth. I bent as though tying my shoe and picked it up. Only 3 words were visible. Completion before gala. Below them was a handwritten number. 8.4 million. The legacy gala was scheduled for 12 days later. The property sale would be completed before then. Claire was running out of time. So was I. The next morning, the brass key appeared inside my house. I did not place it there myself. Evelyn had made me promise not to enter again. Instead, I used someone Claire never noticed. A flower delivery service. I ordered white lilies, the same flowers for my memorial, and requested that a small envelope be placed beneath the ribbon. Inside was the key. No note. No name. The flowers arrived at 11:23. I watched from a rented room across the street. Claire opened the door wearing my gray cardigan. She accepted the bouquet with a distracted smile. Then she saw the envelope. The smile faded. She looked up and down the street. The delivery driver was already returning to the van. Claire carried the flowers inside. For 6 minutes, nothing happened. Then she emerged without a coat. She scanned the pavement, the neighboring houses, the parked cars. Her face was pale. She called someone. I could not hear the conversation, but her free hand remained clenched around the brass key. The reaction confirmed two things. She remembered it. And she believed no one else could have sent it. An hour later, Claire drove to the cemetery. I followed by bus and walked the final distance. She stopped at my mother's grave. There was already a temporary memorial plaque beside it bearing my name. Seeing my own name in the ground created a sensation I cannot explain. It was not fear. It was displacement. As though the world had assigned me a place and expected me to remain inside it. Claire stood before the plaque for nearly 20 minutes. She did not bring flowers. She held the key. Finally, she crouched and placed it against the base of the memorial. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The wind carried the words toward me. Then she added something quieter. "I didn't know they would go this far." My body became completely still. They. Not I. Claire believed someone else had expanded the scheme. Or she wanted to believe it. A black sedan waited near the cemetery entrance. Leonard's driver stood beside it. Claire wiped her face before returning to the car. She left the key behind. After she was gone, I approached the grave. For a moment, I looked at my mother's name, then at mine. The dates beneath my photograph were precise. Official. False. I picked up the brass key. It felt colder than before. Evelyn did not like what I told her. "Claire may be afraid of Leonard," she said. "That does not make her an ally." I didn't say it did. "You are thinking it." I heard her say she didn't know they would go this far. That could mean anything. It means there are others. We already know Daniel and Leonard are involved. Maybe the original plan was smaller. Evelyn leaned back in the booth of the quiet cafe where we had met. Smaller identity theft? I'm trying to understand the sequence. You're trying to locate the version of Claire you can forgive. The words landed cleanly. I looked down at my tea. I don't know whether I want to forgive her. Yes, you do. No. You want a reason that allows you to hate what she did without hating who she is. I said nothing. Evelyn softened slightly. That is human. It is also dangerous. She slid a folder toward me. Inside were copies of planning documents. Leonard's company intended to purchase my house, 3 neighboring properties, and the rear service lane. The stated purpose was restoration. The private investment proposal described luxury residential offices, underground parking, and exclusive membership spaces. The projected return depended on obtaining all properties before the gala. One owner was refusing to sell. Mr. Alvarez. The man with the blue pickup. My neighbor for 22 years. He has a hearing problem, I said. And his daughter manages most of his paperwork. His daughter believes he should sell. He won't. Then Leonard needs another way to pressure him. I remembered the structural hardship petition. If my house is declared unsafe, they could claim the entire row is unstable. That is one possibility. Which inspector signed the report? Evelyn pointed to the final page. The name meant nothing to me. But the company did. Voss Development Compliance Services. Leonard had inspected the property through his own subsidiary. They are manufacturing blight, I said. Yes. To reduce the price. And accelerate approvals. My anger became strangely calm. Not diminished. Refined. Claire had used my death as the emotional center of a property scam. My home was not the final prize. It was the first domino. The second object I sent was a photograph. It showed Claire and me at 26, standing on the roof of our old apartment building during a citywide blackout. The photograph had been taken with a disposable camera. Claire was laughing, head thrown back, while I held a candle inside a coffee mug. On the back, in Claire's handwriting, were the words, "No light, no money, no plan. Still here." I scanned the image at a print shop, then mailed the copy to the Legacy Initiative office. Again, no message. The envelope arrived the next afternoon. This time, Claire did not call anyone immediately. She locked her office door. Through the warehouse's street-facing windows, I saw her close the blinds. She remained inside for nearly 3 hours. When she finally emerged, she looked exhausted. She drove directly to my house, entered through the front door, and turned on every light. That night, she slept in the guest room. Not mine. The next morning, a security company installed cameras along the property. She was frightened now. But not enough to confess. Fear changed her behavior. She stopped wearing the ring in public. She canceled 2 Legacy Initiative interviews. She questioned the housekeeper about misplaced objects. She called the police once to report a possible intruder but withdrew the complaint when they found no forced entry. Most importantly, she began moving documents. At 11:41 evening, 3 nights after the photograph arrived, Claire carried 2 archive boxes from the house to her car. I followed her to the Legacy Initiative office. She entered alone. The warehouse lights remained on until almost 2 in the morning. The next day, Evelyn discovered that Claire had requested emergency shredding services. Collection was scheduled for Friday. We had less than 36 hours. "We go to the police now," Evelyn said. "Not without seeing what she's destroying. You cannot break into that office." I helped select the security system. That sentence is not a legal defense. There's a records room with an exterior ventilation window. No. It was damaged during construction. The lock never aligned properly. No. Evelyn. No. She stood in the motel room with both hands braced against the desk. "You are not climbing into a warehouse at midnight." I climbed into an attic. And demonstrated poor judgment successfully. If those records disappear, we lose the connection. We already have corporate filings. Not the forgery. You do not know the forgery is there. Why else schedule emergency shredding after receiving the photograph? Because you frightened a criminal. Yes. And frightened criminals become unpredictable. I looked at the evidence arranged across the bed. Property filings. Account summaries. Public announcements. Photographs. None proved Claire had forged the death report. None proved Leonard ordered it. None proved Daniel knew. We had a story. Claire had documents. "I'm going," I said. Evelyn watched me for several seconds. Then she removed her glasses. "If I cannot stop you, I am at least going to prevent you from getting trapped in a ventilation shaft." We entered the warehouse at 1:17 in the morning. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick beneath the streetlights. Evelyn remained in the car with her phone ready. I approached from the riverside, where the building's brick wall faced an abandoned loading area. The ventilation window sat 7 feet above the ground. Someone had stacked plastic pallets nearby. I climbed carefully. The frame opened after 2 attempts. Inside, the air smelled of printer toner and fresh paint. I lowered myself onto a filing cabinet. The metal bent beneath my weight with a soft pop. I froze. No alarm. No footsteps. Only the distant mechanical hum of the heating system. I climbed down. The records room contained 6 shelving units, 2 locked cabinets, and several archive boxes marked for destruction. I switched on a small flashlight and began photographing labels. Most contained donor forms and property applications. Then I found a box labeled ME Transition. Inside were copies of my insurance records, password reset confirmations, medical authorization forms, a power of attorney bearing my signature. Every document had been prepared before my reported death. Claire had not simply waited for news from overseas. She had built the legal machinery in advance. My hand shook as I photographed each page. At the bottom of the box, I found an envelope containing several versions of my signature. Practice lines. My name written repeatedly in blue and black ink. Some attempts were clumsy. Others were almost perfect. Then I saw a page with notes beside each version. 2 upright. M loop smaller. She presses harder at the end. The handwriting belonged to Claire. I knew the slant. I knew the narrow shape of her capital S. 32 years of birthday cards had made it unmistakable. I photographed everything. Then I heard a door open in the outer office. Voices. A man and a woman. I switched off the flashlight and crouched behind the shelves. The woman was Claire. The man was Leonard. Their footsteps approached. You said it was handled, Leonard said. It was. Then why are you panicking over an old photograph? Because it came here. So? No one knew about that roof. Apparently someone did. Mara had the only copy. Leonard laughed quietly. Mara is dead. You keep saying that. Because it remains useful. Their footsteps stopped outside the records room door. I held my breath. Claire spoke more quietly. The key was buried with her memorial. The key was junk. It was ours. You are becoming sentimental at an inconvenient time. I want the originals destroyed tonight. The company arrives Friday. I don't trust the company. Leonard sighed. You have already made 3 copies of everything. I didn't. The silence that followed was immediate. What do you mean? Claire asked. I mean Daniel made copies. Why? Insurance. Against whom? Everyone. Claire's voice changed. You told me Daniel didn't know about the declaration. He knew enough. No. You said he believed the report. He believed what he needed to believe. That isn't the same thing. It is when money is involved. A cabinet door opened in the outer office. Papers shifted. Claire said, this was supposed to be temporary. Leonard laughed again, but there was no humor in it. You declared a living woman dead. You said she would stay overseas another year. And you said no one would challenge the estate. I thought we would reverse it before she came back. My hand tightened around the phone. Reverse it. Claire had expected me to return. The plan had not begun as permanent erasure. That did not make it harmless. It made it more reckless. More selfish. She had intended to use my death temporarily, empty my accounts, transfer the property, then somehow restore me to life after everything valuable had changed hands. As if a person could be legally resurrected without consequence. As if I would accept an apology once my home was gone. Leonard's voice hardened. The situation changed. Because you changed it. Because opportunity expanded. You forged the incident report. You provided the personal details. You said it would only support the estate petition. And it did. You changed the beneficiary. You gave me access. I gave you access to correct her expired policy information. You signed the authorization. You told me it was administrative. Leonard moved closer to the records room door. So now you're innocent? No. Claire's answer came quickly. Too quickly. No, I'm not innocent. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she continued. But I never agreed to erase her permanently. You wore her ring. The cruelty in his voice was almost casual. Claire said nothing. You slept in her house, Leonard continued. Took her job. Used her name. Do not pretend I dragged you through every door. You opened most of them yourself. I know. You wanted her life. I wanted one part of it. Which part? Another silence. When Claire answered, her voice was barely audible. The part where people listened when she entered a room. Something inside me broke quietly. Not because it was the worst thing she had done. Because it was the most honest. For years, I had mistaken Claire's admiration for love. Perhaps she had loved me. Perhaps envy had grown beside it until neither of us could tell them apart. Leonard stepped into the records room. Light from the outer office spread across the floor. I pressed myself against the shelving. He stopped less than 6 feet away. Claire remained near the doorway. I want the signature sheets, she said. They're in the transition box. Leonard moved toward it. The box was on the floor beside my knee. I could see the shine of his shoes through the gap beneath the shelf. He bent. His hand reached into view. Then Evelyn's car alarm exploded outside. The sound tore through the silence. Leonard straightened. What was that? Claire hurried toward the window. Your car? No. The alarm continued. I heard Leonard leave the room. Claire followed. I slid the signature sheets beneath my coat. Then I climbed onto the filing cabinet, pushed open the ventilation window, and pulled myself through. My knee struck the frame. Pain shot up my leg. Outside, Evelyn stood beside the car holding the alarm remote. Move, she said. I dropped onto the pallets, nearly fell, then reached the car. We drove away without headlights for half a block. Only when we crossed the bridge did Evelyn turn them on. You took something, she said. The signature sheets. I told you to photograph documents, not steal them. They were about to destroy them. You have now removed evidence from its location. I also recorded the conversation. Evelyn looked at me. You what? I held up the phone. Her expression changed. Did they admit to the forgery? Most of it. Daniel? He knew more than Claire thought. Evelyn pulled the car to the curb. Play it. I did. We listened to Claire's voice fill the dark car. I never agreed to erase her permanently. Then Leonard's. You declared a living woman dead. Evelyn closed her eyes. That is enough, she said. For the police? For warrants, probably. Probably? The recording was made during an unlawful entry. I entered property purchased with my name and money. Legally. I know. I'm dead. She looked at me. This is no longer about keeping Claire unaware. We contact the police now. I stared through the windshield at the river. Across the water, the Legacy Initiative building glowed against the dark sky. One office light switched on. Claire had returned to the records room. Perhaps she had noticed the missing papers. Perhaps she had seen the open ventilation window. Perhaps she had understood that the old photographs and keys were not messages from guilt. They were messages from me. My temporary advantage was ending. Back at the motel, I spread the stolen pages across the bed. Claire's practice signatures covered 12 sheets. On the final page, beneath my name, someone had written a list of dates. Insurance update. Authority letter. Estate transfer. Hardship filing. Property completion. Legacy gala. Every stage of the plan had been scheduled. Beside Legacy gala, Claire had written. Public announcement after final transfer. No reversal possible. No reversal. Whatever she had told Leonard in the warehouse, she had known the sale would become permanent. Maybe she had lied to him. Maybe she had lied to herself. At the bottom of the page was another handwritten note. Not Claire's. Daniel's. I recognized the heavy block letters from years of board documents. Ensure Emmy cannot appear before completion. Evelyn read it twice. That could refer to a legal appearance, she said. Or a physical one. We do not assume. They knew I might return. Yes. They planned around it. Yes. And the gala is the deadline. Yes. I looked at the calendar. 9 days remained. The police detective Evelyn trusted was named Samuel Reed. He met us in a private consultation room at a small legal office shortly after sunrise. Reed was in his late 50s, with tired eyes and the patient expression of someone accustomed to hearing unbelievable stories. He examined my passport. Then my photographs from the village. Then the bank documents. He listened to the warehouse recording without interrupting. When it ended, he removed his headphones. This gives me a direction, he said. Only a direction? It was recorded during a break-in. I entered my own office. Not according to current records. I leaned back. How many times must I prove I'm alive before people stop explaining that I'm dead? Reed did not react defensively. That is exactly the problem, Ms. Ellison. Your identity is obvious to me. Legally, it remains disputed. If I move carelessly, their attorneys will argue the investigation began with evidence obtained by an unidentified trespasser impersonating a deceased woman. Then what do you need? Independent evidence. Such as? The original foreign report. Financial communication connecting the parties. Proof of fabrication from someone inside the process. Claire's confession isn't enough? It is useful. But she could claim coercion, exaggeration, or a private argument taken out of context. She said she declared a living woman dead. She may say she believed you alive at one stage and later received confirmation of your death. The patience in his voice made the reality more frustrating, not less. Truth was not a key. It was a pile of pieces someone had to assemble in the correct order. Reed agreed to begin quiet verification through the Foreign Records Office and the aid organization. He warned us not to contact Claire. He also asked me to relocate. Why? Because the motel registration is under a variation of your legal name. Claire doesn't know where I am. She may now know you are alive. The room became still. Reed continued. The missing documents and the warehouse entry will force them to consider that possibility. Would Claire hurt me? He did not answer immediately. People who commit financial fraud often believe they are not violent, he said. That belief can change when exposure becomes certain. Evelyn looked at me as though she had been waiting for someone else to say it. We left separately. I returned to the motel to collect my suitcase. The room door was slightly open. I stopped at the end of the corridor. The cleaning cart was parked near the elevator, but no housekeeper was visible. My key card remained in my pocket. I had locked the door. I stepped backward. Then I noticed a faint melody. thin, metallic, coming from inside the room. The music box. The silver swan Claire had given me on my 25th birthday was playing behind the half-open door. I did not enter. I called Reed from the stairwell. The police arrived 12 minutes later. They searched the room. No one was inside. My suitcase had been opened. The mattress had been lifted. The drawers were pulled out. Nothing valuable was taken. The memorial flyer had been placed on the pillow. Across my printed face, someone had written 4 words in black ink. "You should have stayed dead." Reed photographed it. Evelyn stood beside the window, arms folded tightly. "Claire?" she asked. I looked at the handwriting. The letters were clean. Mechanical. Nothing like hers. "No," I said. I thought of Daniel's note. "Ensure ME cannot appear before completion." The warning was not emotional. It was operational. Claire was frightened by the possibility that I had returned. Someone else was prepared for it. That evening, Reed moved me to a secure apartment belonging to the legal office. It had bare walls, locked windows, and no personal history. I should have felt safer. Instead, I felt erased all over again. Evelyn left just before midnight. Reed stationed an officer downstairs. I sat alone at the kitchen table with Claire's signature sheets arranged in front of me. The practice strokes became cleaner from page to page. At first, she had struggled to imitate me. Then she learned the pressure of my hand. The shape of my loops. The slight downward turn at the end of my name. I imagined her sitting at my dining table, practicing beneath the lamp while my letters from overseas disappeared somewhere between the village and home. Perhaps she read them. Perhaps she destroyed them unopened. I did not know which possibility hurt more. At 2 a.m, Evelyn's old phone vibrated. Unknown number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. No one spoke. I heard breathing. Then the faint crackle of an outdoor line. "Claire?" I said. The breathing stopped. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then her voice came through. "Mara?" My name sounded fragile in her mouth. I did not answer. Claire inhaled sharply. "Oh God." A door closed in the background. She lowered her voice. "Are you alive?" I looked at the empty room around me. She had seen enough evidence to suspect it. But she still needed confirmation. "Mara, please." There were tears in her voice. Real or practiced, I could not tell. "I know you're there." I waited. Silence had brought her to me. Now it made her continue. "I can explain. The oldest promise of every betrayal. I never meant for this to happen the way it did." I closed my eyes. Claire began speaking faster. "They told me you weren't coming back. Then they said the project was collapsing, and if I didn't cooperate, everything would disappear anyway. Your house, the trust, all of it." Still, I said nothing. "I thought I could fix it before you returned." The warehouse confession again. A temporary death. A reversible theft. "Mara, Leonard knows." My grip tightened around the phone. "He knows you're alive." A floorboard creaked on her end of the line. Claire whispered, "You need to leave the city." Then a man's voice spoke behind her. "Who are you calling?" Claire gasped. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Seconds later, a message appeared from the same number. An address. No explanation. Just a location near the river and a time. Tomorrow. 11:30 p.m. Come alone. Then another message arrived. A photograph. It showed Claire standing inside my bedroom. Her face was pale. Leonard stood behind her. One hand rested on her shoulder. In his other hand, he held my grandmother's ring. Below the image were 6 words. Bring the signature pages or she disappears. For the first time since returning home, the choice before me was no longer about reclaiming my life. It was about deciding whether the woman who had stolen it was still worth saving. The message remained on the screen until the phone dimmed. Bring the signature pages or she disappears. I enlarged the photograph. Claire stood near the window in my bedroom, still wearing the gray cardigan she had taken from my closet. Her face looked colorless under the bedside lamp. Leonard's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. That frightened me more than if he had been holding a weapon. The gesture looked almost affectionate. It told Claire, and me, that he no longer needed to display force. He believed control had already been established. Detective Reed arrived at the apartment 20 minutes later. Evelyn came behind him, still buttoning her raincoat. Reed examined the photograph without touching the phone. Could have been taken voluntarily, he said. She warned me to leave the city. That supports coercion. It doesn't prove an immediate threat. He said she would disappear. I'm not dismissing it. It sounds like you are. It sounds like I'm trying to prevent you from walking into a trap. He placed the phone inside an evidence sleeve. Did Claire know you had the signature pages? She saw the records box after I left. Leonard probably told her what was missing. Why would they ask for the originals if they could simply deny them? Evelyn answered before I could. Because Daniel's handwriting is on the last page. Reed looked at her. And because, she continued, the signatures can be examined for ink sequence, pressure, and comparison to known samples. Photographs are useful. Originals are better. Reed nodded. They want the evidence erased. They also want Mara alone, Evelyn said. The two of them looked at me. I had already made my decision. I'm going. No, they said together. The agreement between them would have been amusing on any other night. Reed leaned against the kitchen counter. You are not trained for this. I don't plan to fight anyone. That is not the only danger. Claire may be inside that building. Or she may be helping them lure you. I looked at the photograph again. The Claire I had known was capable of lying to a board, forging my signature, and benefiting from my disappearance. I had evidence of those things. I did not yet know whether she was capable of delivering me to Leonard. The uncertainty was painful because both answers felt possible. She called me before the message, I said. She told me Leonard knew I was alive. She may have been establishing credibility. She sounded afraid. You once trusted her enough to give her access to every part of your life. Reed did not say it cruelly. That made it more effective. Your ability to read her is compromised. So what do you suggest? We control the meeting. How? You go to the location. You do not go inside. We observe, identify everyone present, and intervene if Claire appears to be in immediate danger. And the pages? Copies in a sealed envelope. They will check. Then they find paper. That won't satisfy Leonard. It doesn't need to. It needs to keep him speaking. Evelyn folded her arms. And if he demands Mara enter? Reed looked at me. She refuses. I already knew that would not happen. Not because I was reckless. Because Leonard had built the entire scheme around predicting how people would behave. He knew Daniel would protect the trust's reputation. He knew Claire's envy could be turned into cooperation. He knew grief would prevent my colleagues from asking uncomfortable questions. Leonard's attention moved sharply toward him. Daniel said nothing. I continued. You knew there was a possibility. I was told you had made threats against the trust. From a mountain village without a telephone? Claire showed me messages. Forged messages. I didn't know that then. But you took 10%. He looked toward Leonard. It was supposed to protect the trust. Claire gave a small, bitter laugh. Daniel turned on her. You told me the estate would fund the new program. I told you what Leonard told me. No, she said. You told yourself what allowed you to sign. The room went still. For the first time, Claire and Daniel were no longer protecting their shared version of events. Fear was separating them. Leonard tapped the envelope with one finger. This is becoming tedious. Let Claire leave. You are remarkably concerned about a woman who replaced you. I didn't come for her. Claire looked at me. The pain in her expression was immediate. I forced myself not to soften. I came because you made the mistake of putting everyone in one room. Leonard's smile disappeared. He reached for the envelope. I pulled it back. Tell me who forged the foreign report. You already know. I know you arranged it. Then we are saving time. Who inside the aid organization changed my departure record? Leonard glanced toward Daniel. That glance was enough to tell me Daniel knew the name. I turned to him. Who? Daniel rubbed one hand across his face. Mara. Who changed the record? A regional coordinator named Adrian Cole. The name meant nothing to me. Claire spoke quietly. He had gambling debts. Leonard's jaw tightened. Stop talking. Claire looked at him. You said we were already finished. We are finished when the transfer clears. It cleared this afternoon, Daniel said. Leonard turned. What? Daniel's mouth trembled. The escrow release was delayed. You told me it was completed. I told you the bank had approved it. That is not the same thing. For the first time, Leonard's control slipped. He moved toward Daniel. Reed's voice crackled in my ear. We heard the name. Keep them talking. I looked at Claire. Why did you do it? Leonard laughed. Oh, now we reach the emotional portion. I ignored him. Why, Claire? Her eyes filled. I needed money. You had a salary. I had debt. How much? She looked down. Almost 200,000. I stared at her. How? Martin's business. Martin had been Claire's younger brother. He died 6 years earlier. I had believed the debts from his failed restaurant had been settled through bankruptcy. He used my name on some of the loans, Claire said. After he died, I kept paying them. You never told me. You would have helped. Yes. That was the problem. I did not understand. Claire looked up. You always helped. Her voice broke. You found me work. You spoke to the bank. You gave me your spare room after Martin died. Every good thing in my life came with your fingerprints on it. I thought that was friendship. For you, it was. And for you? She hesitated. At first, gratitude. The rain struck the windows. Then I started hearing your name every time someone praised me. I said nothing. Claire continued because silence had always made her fill the space. At the trust, every success was because Mara recommended me. Every donor trusted me because Mara trusted me. Every room I entered, I was your friend before I was myself. You could have left. I tried. You tried to start a consulting business. I invested in it. I know. And when it failed, I never asked for the money back. I know. Then what did you want from me? Her answer came in a whisper. I wanted you to need me once. The words moved through me slowly. You thought stealing my life would make us equal? No. Then what? I thought I could borrow it. Even Leonard looked at her. Claire's eyes remained on mine. When you stopped answering, Leonard said the redevelopment deal could solve everything. We would move the estate temporarily. The insurance money would cover the debts. The new fund would grow. Before you came home, the legal records would be corrected. You declared me dead as a bridge loan? Her face tightened. I know how it sounds. It sounds exactly like what you did. I didn't understand how many systems it would touch. You understood enough to wear my ring. She closed her eyes. I wanted to know what it felt like. To be me? To be someone people were afraid to disappoint. Leonard stepped between us. Enough. And now he believed I would risk myself to save the woman who had betrayed me. If I refused too quickly, he would understand that police were nearby. To expose him, I had to behave closely enough to the woman he thought he understood. But not so closely that I became her. The address belonged to an abandoned ferry office beside the river. By 11:15 the following night, rain was moving across the water in thin diagonal lines. The building sat beyond a chain-link fence, surrounded by warehouses awaiting redevelopment. Only one upstairs window was lit. Reed's officers were positioned in two unmarked vehicles. A third team waited near the river access road. A microphone was hidden beneath the collar of my coat. The signature pages remained locked inside an evidence case at the legal office. I carried convincing copies. Before I left the car, Evelyn caught my hand. If Claire asks you to trust her, don't. I won't. If she cries, don't. I know. If she apologizes. Evelyn. Her grip tightened. I am not worried that you will forgive her. I am worried that you will remember loving her at the wrong moment. I looked at her. Those are not the same thing. They can feel identical under pressure. The ferry office door was unlocked. Inside, the lobby smelled of damp plaster and rusted pipes. A row of broken ticket windows faced the entrance. Water had collected beneath a cracked section of ceiling. My footsteps echoed. Claire? No answer. I moved toward the stairway. Reed's voice came faintly through the receiver hidden in my ear. Maintain position. We don't have visual coverage upstairs. The light at the top of the stairs flickered. Claire? I called again. A chair scraped above me. Then Leonard appeared. He was not wearing a coat. His white shirt sleeves were rolled neatly to his elbows, as though he had been working late in an ordinary office. Mara Ellison, he said. He looked almost pleased. I was beginning to wonder whether the dead had become unreliable. Where is Claire? Upstairs. I want to see her. I want the pages. I held up the envelope. Leonard remained at the top of the stairs. You first, he said. I climbed slowly. With every step, the signal in my earpiece filled with static. At the top was a large office with river-facing windows. Claire sat in a wooden chair near the center of the room. Her hands were not tied. There were no visible injuries. Daniel Price stood beside the window. For 1 second, seeing him hurt more than seeing Leonard. Daniel looked older than he had 9 days earlier in my living room. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His tie had been loosened. He avoided my eyes. Claire did not. The moment she saw me, her face collapsed. Mara. I stopped several feet inside the room. You knew I would come, I said. Claire rose. Leonard placed one hand against her shoulder. She sat again. Daniel stared at the floor. The arrangement became clear. Claire was not the only prisoner in the room. Daniel was frightened too. But fear had arrived too late to make either of them innocent. Leonard extended his hand. The pages. First, Claire leaves. He smiled. You are in no position to negotiate. I'm the reason you're all here. No. Money is the reason we are here. You are an administrative complication. Claire flinched. Leonard noticed. Do not be offended, Mara. The human part of this became irrelevant months ago. That was your mistake. His smile weakened slightly. I placed the envelope on a table but kept one hand over it. You treated people like signatures. But signatures react when you apply pressure. Daniel finally looked at me. Mara, give him the documents. His voice was thin. I stared at him. That is the first thing you say to me? We need to get out of here. You stood at my memorial. Daniel closed his eyes. This isn't the time. It was apparently the time to divide my estate. I didn't know you were alive. You wrote that I could not appear before completion. His face changed. He picked up the envelope and opened it. He pulled out the copied signature sheets. His eyes moved quickly across the pages. Then he tore the first sheet in half. Nothing happened. He looked at me. These are copies. Yes. His face emptied of expression. Claire stood. Leonard, don't. He reached inside his waistband. Reed's voice snapped in my ear. Move away from him. I stepped backward. Leonard drew a compact handgun. The room changed instantly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Daniel's breathing became audible. Claire froze with one hand against the chair. Leonard held the weapon low beside his leg. You brought the police, he said. I brought paper. You would not come alone after the motel. So he had sent the warning. Not Claire. You broke into my room. I searched a room occupied by an unidentified woman using fraudulent documents. You wrote on my memorial flyer. That was Daniel's idea. Daniel looked up sharply. No, it wasn't. Leonard smiled without looking at him. See how quickly loyalty disappears? Reed's voice came through clearly now. Units moving. Stay down when instructed. I needed Leonard focused on me. Where are my letters? His expression shifted. That was not the question he expected. What letters? The ones I sent from the village. Claire looked at him. You said none arrived. Leonard shrugged. Several did. Something changed in Claire's face. You told me she had stopped writing. She had. You showed me the aid report. After the letters. Claire moved toward him. You had proof she was alive. Claire, I warned. She stopped. Leonard raised the weapon slightly. I had proof she was alive at the time the letters were written. That became inconvenient. What did you do with them? I asked. Destroyed them. Claire stared at him. You read them? 1 or 2. What did they say? He laughed. Mostly about you. The truth struck Claire harder than any accusation I could have made. She had built her betrayal partly on the belief that I had forgotten her. Leonard had fed that wound because it made her useful. Claire's mouth opened, but no sound came. You told me she had abandoned everything, Claire said. She abandoned nothing. She was volunteering. You said she planned to stay. I said what you needed to hear. Her shoulders collapsed. Leonard watched her with contempt. You wanted permission. I provided it. Claire turned toward me. I'm sorry. The words came too late. Too small. But they were no longer spoken to escape blame. They sounded like recognition. She finally understood that Leonard had manipulated her. And that manipulation did not erase the choices she made afterward. I am so sorry, she repeated. I looked at her. I know. Hope appeared on her face. Then I continued. But I cannot make that sentence save you. The hope disappeared. A noise sounded on the stairway. Leonard raised the gun. The office door burst inward. Police! Drop the weapon. Everything happened in fragments. Daniel fell behind a desk. Claire screamed. Leonard grabbed her by the arm and pulled her in front of him. The gun rose near her shoulder. I dropped to the floor. Officers filled the doorway. Reed's voice carried above the shouting. Leonard, put it down. Leonard moved toward the rear exit, Claire stumbling with him. She looked at me. For one terrible second, I remembered the girl who had spilled coffee across my notes. The young woman who had sat beside me through my mother's surgery. The friend who knew how I took my tea and which songs made me leave a room. Then Claire drove her heel down onto Leonard's foot. He lost his balance. His arm shifted away from her. She dropped. Officers rushed forward. Leonard was forced against the floor. The gun slid beneath a chair. Daniel remained curled behind the desk with both hands over his head. Claire sat near the window, staring at nothing. Reed crossed the room and crouched beside me. Are you hurt? No. Only after answering did I realize I was crying. Not from fear. From exhaustion. The long game had ended inside a wet, abandoned office. But my life had not yet been returned. Leonard was arrested for unlawful confinement, fraud, identity-related offenses, document forgery, financial conspiracy, and weapons violations. Daniel was taken for questioning. Claire was placed in a separate vehicle. Before the officers led her away, she asked to speak to me. Reed looked at me. I nodded once. Claire stopped several feet away. There was no ring on her hand. Leonard had taken it before the photograph. I thought you were dead at first, she said. I stared at her. For how long? 2 days. And after that? I knew you were probably alive. Probably? The first letter arrived. My throat tightened. You read it? Yes. What did I write? She began to cry. You said the sky would make me forgive the insects. I remembered the line. You knew. Yes. And you continued. Yes. The honesty was almost unbearable. Why didn't you stop? Because by then the insurance documents were filed. Daniel had joined. Leonard said if I withdrew, I would go to prison. So you decided I should lose everything instead? I told myself I would fix it. You told yourself whatever allowed you to sleep in my bed. She lowered her head. I never slept in your bed. The correction surprised me. I slept in the guest room. Why? I couldn't. For one moment, a smaller version of our friendship stood between us. Not enough to repair anything. Enough to make the loss real. Claire looked toward the police car. Your letters are in the wall safe at the Legacy office. Leonard said he destroyed them. He destroyed copies. I kept the originals. Why? Because they were the last proof that you still loved me. I felt anger rise again. You kept my love while you erased my existence. She closed her eyes. Yes. An officer touched her elbow. Claire looked at me one final time. I don't expect forgiveness. That may be the first fair thing you've given me. Then they took her away. The arrests did not become public immediately. Reed's team wanted the wider conspiracy documented before Leonard's attorneys could shape the story. The foreign death record had been created using a corrupt clerk who accepted information supplied through Adrian Cole, the regional aid coordinator. Adrian had altered my travel records, intercepted mail, and reported that I had left the project early. He was arrested 2 days later. Bank investigators froze the remaining accounts connected to the Legacy Initiative. Planning officials suspended the property transfers. The hardship petition on my home was withdrawn after the original inspector confirmed the building had been structurally sound. But one problem remained. The Legacy Gala was still scheduled. Hundreds of donors, board members, journalists, and city officials expected to attend. The event had been advertised as a celebration of my life and the formal launch of Claire's organization. Reed wanted it cancelled. Evelyn disagreed. For months, she said, they used public grief to validate private fraud. The correction must be equally public. Reed looked at me. What do you want? I thought of the memorial flyer. The photographs. The candles. Claire standing at a podium while everyone I knew accepted her version of my death. I want them to see what they believed. The police did not allow me to design a theatrical trap. Real investigations are less elegant than stories. There were warrants, legal reviews, security plans, and strict limits on what could be shown without harming the case. Claire agreed to cooperate. Not in exchange for freedom. That was never offered. Her attorney negotiated consideration for truthful testimony and assistance recovering assets. Daniel also cooperated after learning that Leonard had recorded several of their private conversations as leverage. Both claimed Leonard had expanded the fraud beyond their original understanding. Both were telling partial truths. Both had still benefited. The gala would proceed under police observation. The official reason was that the event had already collected substantial donations that needed to be documented and secured. The real reason was evidence. Several investors connected to Leonard were expected to attend. The final property agreement would be presented. And Daniel, still publicly listed as a board representative, would introduce a video celebrating my life. He would not know until that evening exactly what the video contained. On the afternoon of the gala, I returned to my house for the first time through the front door. Police had completed their search. The locks had been replaced again. This time, Evelyn handed me the key. I stood on the threshold without entering. The hallway smelled of furniture polish and flowers that had begun to decay. My framed memorial photograph still sat beside the fireplace. The silver swan music box was gone, collected as evidence from the motel room. Several walls were bare where Claire had removed paintings for auction. Boxes remained stacked in the dining room. I walked upstairs. My bedroom looked almost untouched. Claire had changed the sheets but left the bed unused. My clothes hung inside the wardrobe, though several expensive pieces were missing. The cedar box sat open on the dresser. Empty. I pressed one hand against the polished wood. My grandmother had told me jewelry remembered. She had been right. The ring remembered her hand. My mother's. Mine. Then Claire's. Objects do not become impure because the wrong person touches them. But they change meaning. Sometimes permanently. Reed recovered the ring from Leonard's apartment. He returned it to me in a clear evidence pouch. "You'll need to sign for it." I did. Then I held the pouch without opening it. "Are you wearing it tonight?" Evelyn asked. "No." She seemed surprised. "Why not?" "Because I don't want my grandmother's ring to become a prop in someone else's arrest." I placed it inside the cedar box. "When I wear it again, it will be because I chose the day." The Legacy Gala was held inside the Ashford Museum's Grand Ballroom. Tall windows overlooked the river. Chandeliers reflected across polished floors. White roses stood in glass arrangements on every table. A 10-foot portrait of me hung behind the stage. Beneath it were the words, "Her legacy lives through U.S." I watched guests arrive from a private room above the ballroom. Some wore small silver ribbons printed with my initials. My colleagues greeted each other softly, maintaining the respectful tone expected at an event connected to death. Several people paused beneath my portrait. One woman touched 2 fingers to her lips before pressing them against the frame. Their grief had been real. That complicated everything. Claire had manipulated them, but she had not invented their affection. For months, they had mourned me honestly. Soon I would walk into the room and force them to question their own memories. Resurrection sounds miraculous until you imagine the embarrassment of those who buried you. At 8:15, the ballroom lights dimmed. Daniel walked onto the stage. The audience applauded. He looked smaller beneath the portrait. He began with prepared remarks. Mara Ellison believed service was not an act of generosity, but an obligation to one another. The sentence came from a speech I had delivered 3 years earlier. Hearing my words in his mouth made my skin tighten. Daniel continued. "She taught us that a meaningful life is measured by what remains after we are gone." Behind the curtain, Evelyn looked at me. "Ready?" "No." "Good. People who feel ready for this sort of thing are dangerous." Daniel introduced the memorial video. The large screen behind him turned black. Soft piano music began. Photographs appeared. Me at the trust. Me beside my mother. Me with Claire. Then the music stopped. The final image froze. It showed Claire and me on the rooftop during the blackout. No light, no money, no plan. Still here. The words remained on the screen. Confused murmurs moved through the ballroom. Then Leonard's recorded voice filled the room. "You declared a living woman dead." Claire answered. "I never agreed to erase her permanently." Gasps spread across the tables. Daniel turned toward the projection booth. The recording continued. His own voice followed. The escrow release was delayed. Then Claire. "You told me Daniel didn't know about the declaration." Leonard replied. "He knew enough." Daniel stepped away from the podium. Security officers moved closer to the stage. The screen displayed copies of the forged death certificate, the insurance changes, and the property filings. Nothing was shown that had not been cleared by investigators. The evidence did not need embellishment. Its order told the story. My death. My estate. The memorial fund. The private company. The property deal. The ballroom doors opened. I walked inside. At first, only the people nearest the entrance noticed me. A woman dropped her glass. It struck the floor but did not break. Then heads turned row by row. The silence moved ahead of me. I wore a plain black suit. No dramatic color. No jewelry. Nothing that allowed the room to treat me as a performance. Daniel saw me when I reached the center aisle. His face emptied. Behind him, my enormous memorial portrait remained lit. For a strange second, the room contained two versions of me. The polished dead woman above the stage. And the living woman walking beneath her. Someone whispered my name. Another person began to cry. I continued forward. Daniel moved toward the steps. Officers stopped him. Several investors attempted to leave through side doors and were directed toward investigators waiting outside. I reached the stage. No one applauded. Thank God. Applause would have made it feel like a victory. It was not. It was an autopsy of trust. I stood behind the podium Daniel had abandoned. For a moment, I looked at the audience. Many faces were familiar. Colleagues. Neighbors. Donors. People who had sent flowers to my memorial. People who had praised Claire for continuing my work. They were not my enemies. But their willingness to accept a tidy story had made the fraud easier. I was told this evening was supposed to celebrate my legacy, I said. My voice carried farther than I expected. The difficulty is that a legacy usually begins after a person has finished living. A few people shifted uncomfortably. I had not. I looked toward the portrait. For 6 months, I worked in communities where communication was unreliable. During that time, letters I sent home were intercepted. Records were altered. A false report was filed. My silence was turned into evidence of my death. The room remained still. My bank accounts were emptied. My insurance policy was changed. My home was placed into an estate process. My position at the trust was taken. And many of you were invited to mourn me. I paused. I do not blame anyone for grieving. Several people lowered their eyes. Grief trusts what it is given. That is why using grief as camouflage is particularly cruel. Daniel stood near the side of the stage between two officers. I looked directly at him. People entrusted with protecting institutions often convince themselves that protecting the institution excuses harming the individual. He looked away. It does not. Claire was not in the ballroom. That had been deliberate. She was already in custody and had agreed to a recorded statement. Her face appeared on the screen behind me. She sat in a plain interview room without makeup, jewelry, or the clothes she had taken from me. I knew Mara was probably alive when the first letter arrived, Claire said in the recording. The ballroom reacted with a low murmur. I continued because I was afraid of what would happen if I admitted what I had already done. I told myself I would repair everything before she returned. She looked down. I also wanted what she had. Her voice tightened. Not only her money or her house. I wanted the trust people gave her. I wanted to enter a room and feel that my presence carried weight. She looked directly into the camera. I confused being loved by Mara with being diminished by her. That was not her fault. I watched from beside the screen. Hearing Claire admit it publicly did not bring satisfaction. It brought grief. Not for the woman on the recording. For the friendship that had existed before envy became more useful to her than love. The recording ended. I returned to the podium. Claire Donovan will answer for what she did. So will everyone who knowingly participated. Police officers approached Daniel. He was arrested in front of the board he had controlled for nearly 11 years. His expression did not change until the handcuffs closed around his wrists. Then he looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said. The microphone carried his words through the ballroom. I did not respond. Some apologies are sincere. They still arrive too late to deserve an audience. The final property documents scheduled for presentation that evening were seized. The money collected through gala donations was frozen. Attendees were interviewed before leaving. Journalists waited outside. I was offered a private exit. I declined. For months, people had seen my face only inside a black border. I would not leave hidden. I walked through the museum entrance while cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Ms. Ellison, how does it feel to be alive? Will you forgive your friend? Did the trust know? Are you returning as executive director? I stopped only once. How does it feel to be alive? A reporter repeated. I looked toward the river. Expensive, I said. Then I continued walking. Legal resurrection took longer than exposing the crime. That surprised people. They assumed that once I appeared publicly, every system would correct itself. Systems do not experience astonishment. They require forms. My death certificate was suspended first, then formally voided after the foreign authority completed its investigation. My passport had to be reissued. My tax status had to be restored. Credit agencies demanded biometric verification. The bank reopened my accounts in stages. Insurance investigators recovered part of the payment from frozen assets. Some money had already been spent. Some property had already been moved through companies designed to make recovery difficult. Being alive did not return everything automatically. Neither did being right. Leonard pleaded not guilty at first. Then Adrian Cole agreed to testify. The foreign clerk provided transaction records. Daniel turned over recordings and financial documents in exchange for a reduced sentencing recommendation. Faced with evidence from every direction, Leonard eventually entered a guilty plea to multiple fraud and conspiracy charges, along with offenses related to the weapon and threats. Daniel was convicted for his role in the financial conspiracy, obstruction, and misuse of trust assets. His public explanation remained consistent. He had believed he was protecting the institution. The court did not consider that a defense. Neither did I. Claire pleaded guilty. Her attorney emphasized that she cooperated, returned assets, disclosed hidden accounts, and helped establish Leonard's larger scheme. All of that was true. It was also true that none of it happened until I returned. At sentencing, Claire asked permission to speak. I attended but sat in the final row. She did not look at me until the judge asked whether she had anything further to say. Then she turned. Mara gave me more chances than I deserved long before this happened, she said. Her voice was steady. I used my knowledge of her as a weapon because I knew her life better than anyone. She paused. I told myself that made the crime temporary. But there is no temporary way to steal someone's identity. Every signature I copied required me to deny that the person I loved was real. She looked toward the judge again. I am not asking her to forgive me. Claire received a prison sentence. Less than Leonard's. More than she had expected when the plan began. As officers led her away, she did not turn back. I was grateful. I did not want our final exchange to belong to a courtroom. The trust's board resigned. An interim committee invited me to return as executive director. They described it as restoration. I declined. For 17 years, I believed the trust was part of my identity. Then someone took both at once, and I discovered they were not the same thing. I agreed to advise the new leadership during the recovery process. But I would not return to the office where my photograph had stood beside a condolence book. Some rooms remember too much. My house was returned to me 4 months after the gala. The neighbors gathered outside when the final legal notice was removed from the door. Mr. Alvarez brought a bottle of wine. The bakery owner arrived carrying a box of pastries and apologized for not recognizing me. It would have been stranger if you had, I told her. Inside, the rooms looked larger without Claire's furniture. Many of my belongings were recovered from auction storage. Others were gone. My mother's winter coats had been sold. The silver candlesticks disappeared into a private collection. 2 paintings were recovered from an investor who claimed he had purchased them without knowing their history. The music box returned inside a police evidence bag. When I opened it, the melody sounded slower than I remembered. Perhaps the mechanism had been damaged. Perhaps memory had changed the tempo. Evelyn helped me sort the house. She insisted this was not emotional support. "It is inventory supervision," she said. For 3 days, we opened boxes, checked lists, and decided what I still wanted. On the 4th afternoon, we found my letters from the village. Claire had kept all 7. They were tied together with a green ribbon inside the legacy office wall safe. Each envelope had been opened. I sat on the dining room floor and read them in order. The first was hopeful. The second complained about insects. The third described the children repairing the school roof. The fourth asked Claire to check on my houseplants. The fifth told her I had begun missing home. The sixth said I would return earlier than planned if transport became available. That letter had probably accelerated the fraud. The seventh was written 10 days before I left the village. I have been thinking about how fortunate I am to have one person who remembers every version of me. Not only the woman people see now, but the frightened student, the exhausted daughter, the stubborn friend. There is a kind of home that is not a building. Sometimes it is a person who has witnessed your life and stayed. I stopped reading. Evelyn sat beside me. "I'm sorry," she said. I folded the letter carefully. "The worst part is that I meant every word." "That is not the worst part." "What is?" "That you think her betrayal made your love foolish." I looked at her. "It didn't?" "No." Evelyn picked up the ribbon. "Trust can be misplaced without being shameful. Her failure does not travel backward in time and turn your loyalty into stupidity." I had spent months feeling humiliated by how thoroughly I had trusted Claire. Evelyn's words did not remove that feeling. But they gave it somewhere else to go. I renovated the house slowly. Not because it needed major repair. Because I needed to choose what remained. The pale curtains Claire installed were removed. The walls were repainted. I turned the room she had used as a legacy initiative office into a reading room. The memorial portrait was taken out of its frame. I kept the photograph but cut away the black border. For a while, I considered selling the house. Every room contained evidence that Claire had occupied it. Then one morning, I found Mr. Alvarez repairing the garden gate. He looked up and said, "Your grandfather built this latch badly. He built it 60 years ago. Then he built it badly for a very long time." I laughed. It was the first time the house sounded like mine again. I decided to stay. Not because the building had escaped damage. Because leaving would have allowed the betrayal to make another decision for me. 6 months after the gala, I returned to the Darren Valley. I carried a new phone, updated records, and copies of every document proving I was alive. The village children had painted my name above the repaired school entrance. Not as a memorial. As a thank you. The sky was as wide as I remembered. At night, the generator changed pitch whenever someone switched on a kettle. I sat outside the guest house with a cup of tea and opened the cedar box. My grandmother's ring rested inside. I had not worn it since it was returned. For a long time, I held it beneath the stars. Then I placed it on my finger. Not because I had reclaimed everything. I had not. Some money was gone. My career had changed. My closest friendship had ended in a courtroom. Trust would never again feel as effortless as it once had. But survival is not the restoration of an untouched life. It is the ability to decide what the damaged life becomes next. People often ask whether I forgive Claire. They expect a clean answer. Yes, because forgiveness proves healing. Or no, because refusal proves strength. The truth is less satisfying. Some mornings, I remember what she did before I remember who she was. Other mornings, I hear her laugh in an old memory and feel grief before anger. I do not excuse her. I do not speak to her. I do not plan my life around the day she may leave prison. But I also refuse to spend the rest of my years standing inside the moment she betrayed me. Perhaps that is forgiveness. Perhaps it is simply distance. I no longer need to name it. For 32 years, Claire was the witness to my life. Then she tried to replace me inside it. What she failed to understand was that a life is not a house, a job, a bank account, or a ring. Those things can be transferred. Forged. Sold. Taken. A life is also the private chain of choices no one else can reproduce. The people you helped when no one was watching. The promises you kept after they became inconvenient. The version of yourself you rebuilt when every official record insisted you no longer existed. Claire learned how to imitate my signature. She never learned how to become me. When I returned to the city, I passed the bakery where I first saw my memorial flyer. The glass door was covered with summer advertisements. No photograph. No black border. I went inside and ordered coffee. The owner recognized me immediately this time. She smiled. "You look well." "I'm getting there." She placed the cup on the counter. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had knocked on your front door that first night?" "Yes." "What do you think?" I looked through the window toward the street. "I think Claire would have cried." "And you would have believed her?" "I might have." The owner waited. "Does that frighten you?" "No," I said. "Not anymore." Because trust is not destroyed by discovering that someone could deceive you. Trust is rebuilt when you learn that even after deception, you can still believe yourself. So let me ask you the same question I had to answer when I stood outside my own house, watching another woman live behind my windows. If you discovered that someone you loved had taken your name, your home, and the life you built, would you confront them immediately? Or would you remain silent long enough to discover how deep the betrayal went? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who believes starting over means returning to who you were before. Sometimes starting over means becoming the person no one else can erase.